TIFU by accidentally faking my own death and turning my family against each other. This all started about 6 months ago, and I'm only just now emerging from the smoking crater of the aftermath. I'm a 29-year-old guy who works freelance as a web developer, and I travel a lot. I never planned for things to go off the rails this badly. So, I was working with a client in Eastern Europe for a few months, Romania to be specific, and I figured I'd go a little off-grid for a while. I've always liked disconnecting when I travel, but this time I took it to another level. I deactivated my Instagram, paused my WhatsApp, and told a few close friends I'd be out of touch for a while to focus. My parents aren't very tech-savvy, so I just let them know vaguely I'd be in Europe for a bit. Here's where the screw-up begins. While I was there, I got mugged. Not a big deal in the end. I lost my wallet and phone, but I had backup cards and could sort things out within a few days. What I didn't realize was that someone who mugged me, or maybe someone else entirely, used my phone briefly before ditching it. A few messages were sent to random contacts, including a half-written text to my mom that literally said, "Help me. They're going to key," and that was it. That was the last message my mom got from me. Cue nuclear-level panic. My mom called the police, who told her there was nothing they could do about an international situation unless there was more information. So she tried the US Embassy in Romania, who apparently flagged it for review. Still nothing. At this point, I'm oblivious. I'm off-grid, rebuilding my setup with a local SIM and a burner phone while trekking through the countryside. I think I sent one group email to a client but otherwise didn't reach out to anyone for nearly 3 weeks. Meanwhile, back home, my mom has assumed the worst. She reaches out to my ex, who I dated for 3 years and who still had some mutual connections with my friends. My ex takes it on herself to start a GoFundMe to raise money for a search and rescue effort in Romania. She posts that chilling text and everything. It goes semi-viral. People start donating. Local papers pick up the story. American software engineer missing in Eastern Europe after cryptic message. The Facebook page gains thousands of followers. My childhood best friend, let's call him Dan, flies out to Romania to look for me. The problem is, Dan and my ex hate each other. He thinks she's milking the situation for clout and money. She thinks he's being reckless and endangering the search. They start throwing shots at each other in public updates. My family splits into factions. My aunt believes I was kidnapped by a gang. My uncle thinks I faked the whole thing to run off with crypto money. I wish I had that kind of foresight. Fast forward to week 4 of me being blissfully ignorant. I'm hiking in the mountains with some random hostel crew, and a Canadian guy asks if I'm the dude from the Facebook thing. I brush it off at first, but later he shows me the page. My full name. My photo. A timeline of my supposed disappearance. A list of people claiming to have seen me in different places like I'm some Bigfoot sighting. At first, I thought it was a joke or a case of mistaken identity. But as I scroll through the page and see pictures I took on my Instagram, which I had deleted, but apparently not before someone archived everything, my stomach drops. I try calling my mom, but she doesn't pick up. I email my dad. Nothing. I message Dan on Facebook. He replies with a wall of all-caps text asking if it's really me and demanding proof. After sending a selfie with my Canadian friend and a time-stamped newspaper, I finally get through. What followed was one of the weirdest, most emotional reunions of my life. My mom cried and screamed and then cried some more when we FaceTimed. She genuinely thought I was dead or being held hostage. My dad, who usually shows zero emotion, hugged the phone to his chest like it was me. Dan started sobbing and calling me an idiot. But not everyone was happy. My ex, who had raised nearly $18,000 through the GoFundMe, immediately started panicking. People were already asking for refunds. She claimed she was deceived and acted in good faith. Dan went nuclear on her in the Facebook group, accusing her of exploiting the situation. She responded by posting screenshots of old texts between us, suggesting I had mental health issues and maybe staged it all. Then my extended family got involved. Arguments broke out in comment sections. One cousin made a video essay dissecting all the evidence of my disappearance. Another relative made a TikTok theory about me running away to avoid getting married. I wasn't even dating anyone. People I hadn't spoken to in years messaged me asking if I was in witness protection or something. Eventually, I made a public statement. I posted a video explaining everything: the mugging, the lost phone, the off-grid living, the total unawareness. I apologized to everyone who worried and said I would work with GoFundMe to help refund the donations. The damage was already done. My family still isn't the same. Holidays are awkward. My mom barely speaks to my ex, who insists she did what anyone would have done. Dan still rants about grief chasers online and refuses to forgive people who assumed I was dead without proof. My aunt sends me links about safety tracking apps every week. I can't go a full day without someone making a back from the dead joke. To top it off, a Romanian news site did a follow-up story on me being found alive, which includes a photo of me mid-bite in a kebab shop with the headline, *American dead man found eating shawarma. So yeah. ******** up by going off-grid and accidentally triggering an emotional civil war across my family and friend group. On the bright side, I've never felt more appreciated. On the downside, my mom now has me on GPS tracking and FaceTime schedules like I'm 12. Moral of the story: if you're traveling, always let someone know you're okay. And maybe don't use vague cliffhanger texts if you're in trouble. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to the channel. It helps the content grow and motivates me to create even more great videos. Turn on notifications so you don't miss any new uploads. By the way, I'm curious, when do you usually watch my videos? While working, studying, or just relaxing at home? Let me know in the comments. I'd love to hear from you. Thank you for your support. TIFU by volunteering to help my girlfriend's grandma with her internet. So this happened last weekend and I still feel like crawling into a hole and disappearing. I, 28M, have been dating my girlfriend, 27F, for almost 2 years. Things are serious. I've met her family, she's met mine, and we've even talked about moving in together soon. Her grandma, whom she calls Oma, is a sweet 83-year-old woman who bakes ridiculous cakes, watches way too much British crime drama, and always calls me the polite young man. So naturally, when she started having issues with her Wi-Fi and FaceTime, I offered to help. Let me preface by saying I work in IT. Nothing crazy, just your average sysadmin stuff, but I'm decent with tech. So when Oma complained that she couldn't connect her iPad to her Wi-Fi and that her FaceTime kept showing strangers, I figured it was just a network issue or maybe some phishing pop-up. We get to her place, this lovely little house that smells like cinnamon and cat hair, and Oma is waiting at the door in a Christmas sweater, in April, holding her iPad like it's a bomb about to go off. My girlfriend kisses her cheek and starts chatting with her in German while I sit down with the iPad. First issue, the Wi-Fi. It wasn't connected. Easy fix, right? I open the settings, check the network list, and connect her to the correct one. The password is written on a sticky note taped to a ceramic chicken on the kitchen counter. Cute. Second issue, her FaceTime. She says she keeps getting strange calls from a man with no pants and that she saw her own self but not really her. I assume this means she either answered a scam call or accidentally opened the camera in selfie mode and got confused. I check her recent FaceTime calls. That's when things take a hard left into hell. The entire call history is filled with usernames I don't recognize. Half of them are obviously fake: Meat Wizard 69, Toilet Tank Top, Hungarian Prince 420. I tap one. It rings. On FaceTime. A man answers. A naked man. Lying on what appears to be a race car bed. He looks right into the camera and says, "Oma, you back again? Wanna see the race car go vroom? I drop the iPad. Literally. My girlfriend stares at me like I'd just declared I was moving to the moon. Oma says, "Oh, is that the nice man with the tattoos?" He waves at me a lot. Turns out, Oma had downloaded an app called Chatly after clicking on some pop-up while trying to watch reruns of Murder, She Wrote. Chatly is basically Chatrelette's degenerate cousin. The app had been requesting camera and microphone permissions and auto-launching FaceTime links to random strangers who were more than happy to chat with a sweet-looking old lady. Most were polite, apparently. Some were not. And some were very not. I begin the digital exorcism. Delete the app, run a virus scan on the iPad using a mobile security app, block all the shady numbers and emails from FaceTime, reset her Apple ID password, and lock down her settings like Fort Knox. I then go to check the router to see if anything else is compromised. That's when I discover that her Wi-Fi network name is omaishot_69. I'm not joking. I ask her who set that up. She says a nice young man from the cable company did it last year. My girlfriend turns pale. For the next hour, I'm sanitizing every bit of her digital presence, deleting half a dozen weird apps, changing passwords, and securing her devices. Meanwhile, Oma is offering us homemade strudel and casually recounting how one young man showed me his musical instrument, but it looked broken. After everything is locked down, I think the worst is over. Then, like a horror movie twist, Oma says, "Oh, can you also help with my Facebook?" I keep getting friend requests from very muscly women with names like Sparkles and Knife Babe. Facebook is worse. Somehow her account has been cloned 3 times. One of the clones has been messaging people, including her priest, saying things like "come see my heavenly blessings" with a suspicious link attached. The real kicker? One of the scam accounts had better profile pictures than the real one. Professionally lit photos of Oma's face cropped onto someone else's body. My girlfriend starts panic reporting every fake profile while I message Facebook support with as much urgency as a man filing a police report. By the end of the evening, I'm emotionally wrecked. My girlfriend is somewhere between laughter and a breakdown, and Oma is completely unfazed, watching Inspector Morse while munching on strudel. Driving home, my girlfriend turns to me and says, "Thank you." Seriously. I don't know what would have happened if you hadn't checked her iPad. I tell her it's fine, and that I'm just glad we caught it in time. Then she adds, "You know, I think she kinda liked the attention." I nearly drove into a tree. TIFU by trying to surprise my girlfriend with a romantic bath and accidentally becoming a local urban legend. So I, 28M, live in a smallish town in the Pacific Northwest where things are usually quiet. Everyone knows everyone, or at least knows someone who knows someone. I've been dating my girlfriend, Anna, 26F, for almost a year, and we recently moved in together. Things were going great, and I decided I wanted to do something sweet for her, a surprise romantic bath. Now, our house is this older rental property with a very charming, deep clawfoot bathtub. You know the kind, great for long soaks, looks like it came out of a haunted manor. I planned the whole thing, rose petals, candles, her favorite wine, even a Bluetooth speaker for soft music. I got home early while she was still working late and got everything set up perfectly. Here's where I start to ruin my life. I decide to test the water temperature by getting in first, just to make sure it's perfect for her. But I was also curious, so I threw in a bath bomb Anna had raved about. It was labeled Moon Forest or something equally whimsical. As it dissolved, the water turned this shimmery dark green with swirls of silver, kind of like looking into a galaxy. Cool. I hop in. That's when things start to feel off. The bath bomb had some essential oil in it that, apparently, I am very allergic to. Within minutes, I start to feel itchy. Not just normal itchy, like, my entire body feels like it's been rolled in fiberglass. My skin starts blotching, my chest tightens up, and my eyes swell a little. I panic, jump out of the bath, slip on the rose petals, great idea, past me, and crash headfirst into the laundry hamper. I scramble to my feet, dripping green glitter goo all over the floor, and try to rinse off in the shower, but it's too late. I'm wheezing. My throat is closing. I have to get help. Naked, green, and wheezing, I stumble outside to get to my car. But my keys are inside. And the door locks behind me. Now I'm locked out. Naked. Slick with Moon Forest bath bomb, looking like the creature from the lagoon. It's also late October, which means it's cold. Hypothermia becomes a real concern. I sneak through the backyard, trying to find another way in, but there's no luck. I consider breaking a window, but that's expensive, and again, I am naked. So I do what any rational person would do. I crawl under our porch to hide from the wind and figure out my next move. Here's the twist. Our neighbor across the street, let's call her Barb, is a super involved neighborhood watch type. Barb also has Ring cameras. Barb sees everything. She catches a glimpse of a slimy green figure crawling under our porch at dusk. She doesn't recognize me, why would she? She's never seen me stark naked, glowing, and covered in glitter before. So she calls the police. I'm under the porch, starting to shiver, when I hear footsteps. Come out with your hands up. 2 officers. Flashlights. Guns drawn. I try to explain, but my voice is barely working. I croak something like I live here, bath bomb, locked out, throat dying. They don't quite know what to do. One officer radios for EMTs while the other helps me out from under the porch. I'm still naked, still shimmering like a disco ball made of algae, and now being wrapped in a blanket like I'm some kind of forest cryptid. EMTs arrive. They jab me with an EpiPen, load me into the ambulance, and ask if I've taken any drugs because I am clearly not sober by their logic. I'm just allergic to lavender oil, but try explaining that when your face looks like a puff pastry and your body is sparkling like you lost a fight with a craft store. Now, remember, small town. Word spreads fast. By the next morning, there are already posts on the local Facebook group about the Emerald Porch Goblin. Barb is interviewed on the local news station describing a glitter-covered home invader that hissed like a possum. Someone even shares Ring footage of me slithering across the lawn. It goes mildly viral. Anna comes home during all of this. She gets the full story from the EMTs and the cops, rushes to the hospital, and nearly chokes laughing when she sees me. I'm fine at that point, dignity shattered, but alive. The worst part? The hospital staff absolutely did not let it go. I got wheeled out the next day with a nurse humming Monster Mash. One of them slipped a green bath bomb into my discharge bag. Very funny. So now I'm locally famous. People still bring it up. Kids on Halloween left glittery footprints on our porch. I got a package addressed to the Emerald Goblin with a bathrobe inside. Anna has not stopped telling this story. Ever. Every new person we meet gets the rundown, complete with impressions and dramatic reenactments. I can't even walk into our local grocery store without someone giving me a wink and asking if I'm staying away from bath bombs. On the plus side, Barb now waves at me when I take out the trash, so I guess we're cool. And I installed a key lockbox outside the house. TIFU by accidentally starting a fire in my neighbor's house while trying to impress them with my cooking skills. I've always considered myself a decent cook. I've never gone to culinary school, but I've watched enough YouTube tutorials and cooked enough meals to feel confident in the kitchen. My neighbor, Greg, is an older guy who lives alone, and we've chatted over the fence a few times. He's a friendly guy, always happy to help out when I need a hand, but we haven't really formed any sort of deep friendship. We're on good terms, though, and I figured, hey, why not invite him over for dinner? I wanted to make it a bit of an event, you know? Something special to break the ice and build some good rapport. The problem is, I wanted to do something that would really impress him. I've heard him talk about liking fancy food a few times, so I decided to make a dish that I thought was sophisticated but also something I could actually pull off, beef Wellington. It's a bit of a showstopper, right? Something that would show him I'm not just another microwave dinner guy. So I spent the whole day getting everything ready. I went to the store, spent way more than I should have on ingredients, and made sure to follow every step of the recipe to the letter. I even made a list of wine pairings, because I wasn't going to show up with anything less than a full-on experience. I knew Greg liked red wine, so I bought a nice bottle to go with the meal. All that was left was to invite him over and let the magic happen. When I knocked on his door, I was feeling pretty good about myself. He opened the door, and I gave him my best "I've got this in the bag" smile. "Hey, Greg. I was wondering if you'd like to come over for dinner. I'm making something special tonight." His eyes lit up a little, which made me feel even better. "Oh? What are you making?" "Beef Wellington," I said with a nod, trying to sound as confident as possible. "Sounds fancy." "Sure, I'd love to come over." We agreed that he'd be at my place in about 30 minutes, so I rushed back inside to finish setting everything up. I preheated the oven, checked the Wellington, and carefully arranged the wine glasses. But then I realized something important: the Wellington needed to be in the oven for an hour and a half. This would have been fine if I'd started cooking it earlier, but since I was running behind, it was going to be cutting it close with timing. Greg would be there soon, and I didn't want him waiting around forever for the food to cook. So, I did what any sane person would do in a panic. I cranked the oven temperature up to 450 degrees Fahrenheit to try and speed up the cooking time. I figured it'd be fine. After all, I'd seen people on TV cooking things at ridiculously high temperatures, right? A little higher heat never hurt anyone, right? I shoved the Wellington in the oven and set a timer. I figured I'd have about 10 minutes to spare to set up some other things before Greg arrived. But, of course, the universe had other plans. About 10 minutes later, I heard a strange sound coming from the kitchen. A hissing, crackling noise. At first, I thought maybe it was just the fat from the Wellington dripping onto the oven floor or something. But then, the smell hit me. It wasn't the delicious scent of beef roasting in the oven, it was something else entirely, something smoky. I ran into the kitchen, and that's when I saw it. The Wellington wasn't just cooking, it was burning. The pastry crust was blackened, and smoke was pouring out of the oven like a fog machine at a concert. My heart stopped for a moment, but I had to act fast. I grabbed the oven mitts and yanked open the oven door, expecting the worst. The inside of the oven was a disaster. The Wellington had burst open, and the entire thing was covered in blackened char. But that wasn't even the worst part. The fat that had dripped out of the meat had caught fire. There were actual flames licking the sides of the oven now. I panicked. I didn't have a fire extinguisher in the kitchen, because who needs a fire extinguisher in their home, right? I didn't even think about that. I grabbed the first thing I could find, a dish towel. I soaked it in water and tried to slap the fire out, but instead, I just made the situation worse. The towel caught fire too, and now I had a flaming towel in my hand. At this point, the fire alarm went off, and I was absolutely losing it. I ran to the sink and dunked the towel in water, trying to put out the flames, but I'd already left a trail of smoke throughout the house. I couldn't even think straight. It was like everything I tried to do just made it worse. I heard Greg knock on the door. It was like the universe was mocking me. "Hey, you good in there?" Greg called out. I was choking on the smoke, trying to regain my composure. I took a deep breath, opened the door, and greeted him with a weak smile. "Hey, yeah. Everything's fine. Just, a little kitchen mishap. But we're good." Greg's face instantly scrunched up in confusion as he walked into the smoke-filled house. What's that smell?" "It's like something's burning in here." I felt my cheeks flush. "Oh, yeah, it's a bit smoky. I had a small issue with the Wellington, but it'll be fine. Just give me a second to open a window." I stumbled to the kitchen, still trying to air out the smoke. Greg followed me, and when he saw the disaster that was my once pristine beef Wellington, now a charred, unrecognizable mass of burnt pastry and meat, he just stared at it in horror. "Well, that's, something," Greg said, clearly trying to be polite but failing. I could feel my stomach drop. This was supposed to be my big moment. Instead, it was turning into a nightmare. I apologized over and over, but Greg just laughed it off, which made me feel even worse. "Hey, no worries, buddy. It happens to the best of us," he said, trying to reassure me. But I could tell he wasn't exactly eager to eat the charred remains of my ambitious dinner. In the end, we ended up ordering pizza. Greg was kind enough to stay and chat while I set up the pizza on the table, but the whole evening was a disaster. I thought I'd impress him with my cooking skills, but instead, I'd nearly burned his house down. It was a humbling experience, and honestly, I haven't cooked a fancy meal since. But Greg and I still get along fine. He always jokes about the fire hazard I nearly became, but I know he appreciates that I tried, even if it went horribly wrong. Maybe next time, I'll just stick to a nice, safe pasta dish. At least I didn't burn down the whole neighborhood. That's a win, right? TIFU by trying to impress my crush with a homemade dinner and almost burning down my apartment. I've always been the type of guy who likes to cook. Not professionally, of course, but I can throw together a decent meal if I need to. So when I found out my crush Emma was coming over to my place for dinner, I thought I'd show off a little and cook something fancy. I've been into her for a while, and I thought this would be a great way to make a good impression. But as you'll see, things didn't exactly go according to plan. Emma and I had been friends for a while, and we'd hung out a few times at cafes, bars, and even a couple of hikes. But we'd never actually hung out one-on-one at my place. So when she suggested coming over for dinner, I thought, all right, this is my chance to really impress her. I mean, what's more romantic than a home-cooked meal, right? I could already picture her being blown away by my culinary skills and maybe even thinking I was a little more mature than the average guy. I wanted to cook something that would stand out, so I decided to make a fancy Italian dish, chicken parmesan, with homemade marinara sauce and garlic bread on the side. Simple, but impressive, right? I went to the store, got all the ingredients, and spent the afternoon preparing everything. I even bought a bottle of wine, which I don't typically drink, but I thought it might add to the romantic atmosphere. The evening was set. Emma was supposed to arrive around 7 p.m., and I figured I could have everything ready by then. I was feeling pretty confident. The sauce was simmering on the stove, the chicken was breaded and ready to be fried, and the garlic bread was all prepped. All I had to do was fry the chicken, bake the garlic bread, and serve it up. Easy, right? So, I start with the chicken. I heated up the oil in the pan, added a little seasoning, and tossed the chicken into the hot oil. Now, this is where I made my first mistake. I was so focused on impressing Emma that I didn't pay attention to the temperature of the oil. It was way too hot. The moment the chicken hit the oil, it immediately started to splatter everywhere. I swear, I had a moment where I thought the chicken was about to take off into the atmosphere. Oil was popping, hissing, and spraying all over the place. I panicked, and in my attempt to control the chaos, I moved the pan too quickly. The hot oil splashed onto my forearm, and I yelped out in pain, dropping the spatula in the process. At this point, I was in full-blown panic mode. I was doing my best to keep it together, but I could feel the sweat starting to form. I quickly grabbed a towel, wiped my arm, and turned off the stove, but now the chicken wasn't cooking properly. It was either overcooked on the outside or raw on the inside, and I was getting frustrated. In my frustration, I bumped into the bottle of wine that I'd placed on the counter, sending it crashing to the floor. I froze for a second, looking at the shattered glass and spilled wine all over my kitchen floor. I was about to throw in the towel, but I quickly realized Emma would be there in less than 30 minutes, and I wasn't even close to having everything ready. So, I swallowed my pride, cleaned up the mess, and decided to make a quick fix. I opted to move the chicken to the oven to finish cooking, figuring I could save it by baking it for a while. As I threw the chicken in the oven, I turned my attention to the garlic bread. But, of course, I had forgotten to preheat the oven, so the bread wasn't going to bake properly unless I waited even longer. At this point, I knew I was running out of time. So, I decided to speed things up by cranking the heat up on the oven and hoping for the best. I hear the knock at the door. Emma had arrived. I opened the door, trying to put on my best calm and collected face, but I'm sure I looked like a deer in the headlights. Emma smiled and said something about how I looked nice. I was wearing my least wrinkled shirt, but I could tell something was off. I had no time to sit down and chat, so I quickly ushered her into the kitchen. The smell of burned garlic was wafting through the apartment by this point. Emma raised an eyebrow, and I immediately started to apologize, explaining that garlic bread is a tricky dish to get just right. She smiled awkwardly and said it was fine, but I could tell she was already questioning the state of the meal. I rushed over to the oven, opened it up, and found that the garlic bread was no longer just a little burnt, it was completely charred. It was like I had made a little bread brick. I shoved it aside and pulled the chicken out of the oven, only to realize that it had dried out and turned a lovely shade of dark brown. At this point, Emma was trying to hide her concern, but it was pretty obvious. I quickly plated the food and set it down on the table like everything was fine, but it was not fine. The chicken looked like it belonged in a desert, and the garlic bread could have been used as a weapon. I sat down across from her, hoping against hope that she wouldn't notice how terrible everything was. She picked up her fork, poked the chicken, and hesitated. "This looks interesting," she said, trying to be polite. I smiled nervously and asked her what she thought. She took a small bite, chewed slowly, and then looked me in the eye and said, "You know, I've never really had a chicken parmesan with this texture before." At that point, I couldn't even pretend anymore. I burst out laughing, which made her laugh too, and we both just sat there for a moment, realizing the absurdity of the situation. I apologized profusely and offered to order takeout. We ended up laughing about it for the rest of the night. It wasn't the romantic dinner I had imagined, but I did learn a valuable lesson: never try to impress someone with cooking unless you're really, really sure of what you're doing. So, yeah, TIFU by trying to make a fancy homemade dinner and almost setting my kitchen on fire while trying to impress a girl. At least we can laugh about it now / I think. But I'm pretty sure I'm not cooking for her again anytime soon. TIFU by accidentally sending my ex a nude photo I was planning to send to my current girlfriend, so this happened last night, and I'm still not entirely sure how to process it. I'm honestly not even sure if I should be mortified or just laugh at the absurdity of the whole situation, but here it goes. A little background: I, 26M, recently started dating this amazing woman, Emily, 24F. We've been seeing each other for about 6 months now, and everything is going really well. She's beautiful, funny, and super supportive. We've had our share of awkward moments, who doesn't in a relationship, but overall, things have been pretty smooth sailing. However, I do have a bit of a past, and unfortunately, this past came back to bite me in the ass last night. I used to date this woman, Sarah, 25F, and while our relationship was great at first, it slowly started falling apart due to various reasons: lack of communication, different life goals, etc. We broke up about a year ago, and while we're not on terrible terms, it's safe to say we're not exactly friends. We don't talk often, and when we do, it's usually just polite small talk. But because we share a lot of mutual friends, there's the occasional like on Instagram or a comment here and there. Still, I made it pretty clear that I wanted to move on and had no intention of rekindling anything. Now, fast forward to last night. I was lying in bed with my phone, scrolling through some memes and trying to kill time before Emily got back from a night out with friends. As I was browsing Instagram, I saw that Sarah had posted a story. It was something really mundane, like a picture of her dog, but for some reason, I felt this weird twinge of nostalgia. I know, it sounds ridiculous, but the thing is, we had a really good relationship before it all fell apart, and I guess I still had a little bit of an emotional attachment to her. So, like any normal person, I tapped on her story, watched it, and moved on with my evening. Now, here's where things get really complicated. I had been talking to Emily earlier in the day, and we were both feeling pretty frisky. We had been texting back and forth about how we couldn't wait to see each other later and how much we were looking forward to some private time. Naturally, I was feeling a bit horny and wanted to send her a little surprise to make her even more excited for our plans later. I had this very, very private collection of photos on my phone, some intimate pictures from past relationships that I kept hidden in a separate folder for obvious reasons. I know, it's a little shady, but I never thought it would come back to haunt me. Anyway, I decided to send Emily one of those photos to let her know how much I was looking forward to our night together. So, I pulled up the folder, picked the most flattering one, I think you know the type I'm talking about, and got ready to send it. I opened up my messages with Emily, typed a flirty little text, and attached the photo. I hit send and thought nothing of it. But here's where everything went horribly wrong. See, I have this habit of double-checking things before I send them. It's a good habit, right? So, I went back to the conversation to make sure I had sent the right picture to the right person, because, obviously, you don't want to accidentally send the wrong thing to someone. But as I scrolled through my recent messages, my stomach dropped. Right there, in the top of my list, was a conversation with Sarah. For some godforsaken reason, I had sent the nude photo I was planning to send to Emily, to Sarah. At first, I froze. I couldn't breathe. My heart was pounding in my chest, and I could feel my hands trembling as I quickly clicked on the message thread with Sarah. There it was, my nude, sent as if it were some casual hello text. I immediately started panicking. What the hell do I do now? It wasn't just that I sent a nude to an ex, it was the fact that she was also one of my closest friends in a group chat we shared, and I was suddenly imagining all of them seeing my picture. My mind was spiraling. Would she think I was trying to get back together? Did she know I was in a new relationship? Could she tell I was sending this to someone else? I quickly deleted the message, but that didn't seem to help. In fact, the moment I deleted it, I saw that Sarah had already opened the photo. I felt like the walls were closing in. There was no way to take it back. Then, my phone buzzed with a new notification. It was a message from Sarah. Nice photo, she wrote, with a laughing emoji. I died inside. My face went hot with embarrassment, and I could feel the sweat forming on my palms. I knew that Sarah would probably keep the photo to herself and not share it with the group, she wasn't that kind of person. But still, the embarrassment was real, and I couldn't imagine what she was thinking. I had to text her back, right? It was way too awkward to leave it hanging. I took a deep breath and typed out the worst, most awkward message I've ever written in my life. Sorry, that was meant for someone else. My bad. I stared at the screen for a full minute, wondering how she was going to respond. She could have roasted me, called me out, or made it even more awkward by mentioning it the next time we hung out. But instead, she responded with a simple, LOL, don't worry about it, I won't tell anyone. I was relieved, but only for a second. I was still sweating bullets, and the panic didn't completely fade until I saw that she had, in fact, deleted the photo from the thread. After that, I spent the next few hours pacing around my apartment, wondering what the hell I was going to say to Emily. I couldn't exactly tell her that I'd accidentally sent a nude to my ex, right? But at the same time, I didn't want her to find out from Sarah or anyone else. I eventually decided to come clean to Emily. I knew it was going to be awkward, but I'd rather face it head-on than let the whole thing spiral out of control. I sat her down and explained the situation, and surprisingly, she took it really well. She laughed at how ridiculous the situation was and assured me that she wasn't mad or upset. I know that sounds too good to be true, but she genuinely wasn't bothered. We even joked about how it was a pretty funny mistake to make. Still, I'll be double-checking my messages from now on. So yeah, that's my TIFU story. I accidentally sent a nude to my ex while trying to send it to my girlfriend, and I'm never going to live this one down. Lesson learned: be careful with your phone, and always double-check who you're sending those intimate photos to. And Sarah, if you're reading this, please, for the love of all that is holy, don't ever bring this up again. Thanks. TIFU by accidentally sending my boss a picture of me naked instead of my resume. So, this happened yesterday, and I am still cringing just thinking about it. I have been working at this company for a little over 2 years, and recently, I got a new manager. She's pretty cool, very professional, but I had a feeling she was a little stricter than the previous one. That's been bugging me a little because I've always been a good enough kind of worker. Not the best, but I always get my stuff done on time. So, when a job opening popped up in another department, I figured I'd apply. It's a better position, better pay, and I figured it was worth the risk. Now, a little background: I'm not the most tech-savvy person. I know my way around a computer, but I'm not the one you'd call for tech support. I had a few issues with the system at work before, but I always managed to figure it out eventually. But this time, I wasn't exactly on top of my game. So, I start putting together my application. A new cover letter, updating my resume, you know the drill. I wanted to make sure I had everything ready, so when it came time to send it off, I wouldn't mess anything up. My plan was to send it to the hiring manager directly, let's call her Jane, and make a good impression. I spent a few hours tweaking the resume and writing a decent cover letter. Not great, but good enough. After finishing everything, I decide to email it to Jane, hoping she'll notice how eager and professional I am. So I go to my email app, attach my files, and go to type up the message. Nothing too fancy, just a quick greeting, and then I hit the send button. But here's where I made the mistake. I wasn't paying attention to what I was doing. I accidentally opened a conversation I'd had with my friend the previous night, a discussion about some very private matters. I had been texting my friend about some personal issues, and the messages were, let's just say they weren't work appropriate. I didn't even realize that the last picture I had sent him, let's just call it a selfie that wasn't exactly intended for professional eyes, was still in the conversation. So I attached the wrong file. I didn't realize it at first. I was too busy typing my little email and trying to sound confident, but I didn't double-check anything. My nerves were getting the best of me, and I just wanted to get it over with. So, I attached the file and hit send. A few minutes later, I get a notification on my phone. It's an email from Jane. At first, I think, great. She must have already seen my application and wants to get back to me quickly. But when I open the email, the tone immediately feels off. It's polite, but there's this underlying weirdness to it. She said, thank you for your application, but I think you may have attached the wrong file. Could you kindly resend the resume and cover letter? I read that, and for a brief moment, my heart skips a beat. I thought I had attached the wrong file by accident, but when I opened the attachment on my phone, it hit me. I had sent the naked picture I had taken the night before instead of my resume. My stomach dropped, and I almost dropped my phone as well. My mind was racing as I tried to figure out how I could fix it. I immediately started drafting an apology email. Dear Jane, I'm so sorry. That was not the file I meant to send. It was an unfortunate mistake. Here is my actual resume and cover letter attached. I was shaking as I typed, but I was trying to stay calm. I figured, okay, I can still save this. It was a mistake. It's embarrassing, but I can fix it. But I couldn't. Jane had already seen it. She knew exactly what I had sent her. I just knew it. She had to have seen it, right? I mean, it's not like that kind of thing is easy to miss. The thought of her opening that file and seeing me, well, not fully clothed, was mortifying. I wasn't sure whether to laugh or cry. I considered calling in sick to work for the rest of my life and never showing my face there again. I hit send on my apology email and tried to act like I hadn't just made the biggest mistake of my career. I had to get out of my head, but I couldn't stop imagining her face when she opened the email. I knew I wouldn't be able to show up to work the next day without feeling like everyone knew about it. My anxiety was through the roof, and I couldn't stop pacing around my apartment. Now, before I continue, let me clarify that this was not something I intended to send. I'm not some person who does this on purpose. I had no idea that I had sent the wrong file, and trust me, I have never done anything remotely unprofessional like this before. I was just careless and didn't double-check. Fast forward to this morning. I log into my email, fully expecting to have to deal with the fallout. I open the inbox, and the first thing I see is a new email from Jane. My heart is pounding. I click it open, bracing for the worst. "Thank you for your email," Jane wrote. "I appreciate your apology and the corrected resume. I do want to let you know that while your picture was certainly unexpected, we all make mistakes. I can't say I've ever received that type of attachment before, but I believe in giving second chances. I'm still reviewing your application, and will be in touch soon." I had to read that a few times just to process what she was saying. Was she serious? Was she actually taking this professionally? How could she not be totally disgusted or offended by what I had accidentally sent her? At first, I thought maybe she was just being nice, trying to be professional and not call me out too harshly. But then, as I reread it, I realized something: she was being supportive. I mean, she didn't fire me, didn't report me, and she even acknowledged that everyone makes mistakes. Honestly, I was floored. I spent the rest of the day trying to work up the courage to go into the office, dreading the awkwardness of seeing Jane and my coworkers. To my surprise, when I walked in, Jane greeted me with a smile and didn't bring up the whole email fiasco. I was expecting some kind of joke, a laugh, or a "hey, thanks for the interesting attachment," but nothing. It was like it never happened. I'm still not sure if Jane is going to go easy on me because she saw it as a harmless mistake or if she's just too professional to make a big deal out of it. Either way, I'm never sending anything without double-checking again. I also might invest in a better email app that shows the attachments before sending them. I'm just glad I didn't lose my job over it. But yeah, lesson learned. Don't ever send pictures like that by mistake, or at all when you're applying for a job. TLDR, accidentally sent my naked picture to my boss instead of my resume when applying for a new job. Apologized, and somehow, she's still considering my application. I've always considered myself a pretty level-headed guy. I've had a decent job, a stable relationship, and a pretty normal life. But, man, the last week has been a string of catastrophes that I'm still trying to wrap my head around. It all started with something so innocuous, I almost wish I hadn't bothered. It began on a Saturday morning. I had been working from home the past few weeks, mostly due to the pandemic and the fact that my office had let everyone go remote. I'd just gotten out of bed, groggy from a less-than-ideal night's sleep, and was sitting in front of my computer, scrolling through the usual social media nonsense. As I was sipping my coffee, I saw a post about a deal of the century for this super fancy, high-end coffee maker. I've been a bit of a coffee snob, to be honest, so when I saw that the price was nearly half off, I figured it was worth the purchase. So I pulled the trigger. A simple, yet expensive purchase. No big deal, right? I figured it would arrive in a week, and I'd have the best coffee of my life. At the time, I was feeling pretty good about my decision. My girlfriend, Jess, didn't quite get why I was so hyped about it, but she didn't mind either. She's usually the pragmatic one, and I'm the one who falls for all the good deal advertisements. We laughed about it and went on with our day. Here's the first mistake: I didn't do my research. I didn't read the fine print on the post that offered the deal. You know, the one that says, limited supply, only available while stocks last. Well, as you might have guessed, the coffee maker wasn't a high-end product at all. In fact, it wasn't even a coffee maker. I didn't realize that until about a day later, when I got an email confirming my order and it was written in a language I couldn't even understand. My first instinct was to cancel the order, but by then, I had already been charged. So, I figured, well, it's probably some minor mistake. I'll just wait it out. Big mistake. Huge mistake. Fast forward a few days. The package finally arrives. And that's when the disaster really begins. I was expecting a sleek, modern coffee machine. What I got was well, let's just say it was the most bizarre thing I'd ever seen in a box. It wasn't even a coffee maker. It was a tiny, poorly made plastic contraption that looked like it could have been bought at a dollar store. The box it came in wasn't even properly sealed, and I could tell from the dented corners that it had been shoved into the wrong shipping container. I mean, I don't know how this happened, but I was pissed. Now, at this point, I thought maybe I could get a refund. Surely, I could just return this piece of junk, right? I sent an email to the seller, but it bounced back immediately with an error message. My frustration was escalating by the hour. Jess, who had stayed relatively neutral up until this point, started getting annoyed at me for ordering something so ridiculous in the first place. And to make matters worse, I was getting bombarded with email updates from the shipping company about delayed deliveries and misrouted packages regarding the same order. So I started thinking, maybe this thing was part of a bigger scam. I was hoping I wasn't being too paranoid, but I had that gut feeling. That's when I decided to take things into my own hands. I started doing some digging. I pulled up the seller's website, if you could even call it a website, and it was an absolute mess. It looked like it hadn't been updated in years, with broken links and outdated product descriptions. I went through their FAQ section, and the wording was strange, to say the least. There were answers like, we cannot refund unless you've used the product and no returns are accepted after 48 hours of receiving your item. I started piecing things together, and I began to think I might have been scammed. But this is where things take a turn for the worse. I got a message from the seller's customer service a few days later. It wasn't a resolution, though. It was a vague, cryptic email asking for more information about my issue. By this point, I was practically seething. I wanted my money back. I just wanted to move on with my life and pretend this whole thing didn't happen. But no, the universe had other plans. As the week went on, I got even more frustrated. I started posting about the scam on social media, asking if anyone else had encountered the same issues. And that's when Jess dropped a bombshell. Apparently, one of her friends had bought the same exact coffee maker a few months back, and it turned out to be some weird online group buy scam. They had ordered a bunch of fake, knockoff products at cheap prices, sent them out to customers, and then hoped people wouldn't bother trying to get refunds. It was such a convoluted setup, I couldn't believe it. Jess had been sitting on this info for days and hadn't told me. Apparently, she didn't want to get involved, and she didn't think I'd fall for something like that. Great. So now I'm the idiot who got scammed, and my girlfriend's friend is smugly telling me, I told you so. My confidence had completely shattered. I felt stupid, and I was ready to give up. But that's not the end of it. A few days later, I got an unexpected call from my bank. They told me that there had been suspicious activity on my account. Turns out, my credit card information had been compromised. Someone had somehow used my details to order a bunch of stuff from some other random websites. I had no idea how, but after more digging, I discovered that the fake coffee maker purchase was the initial leak. I was absolutely losing it. Not only had I been scammed, but my financial information was now in the hands of some shady hackers. I was going through every transaction, disputing charges, changing my passwords, and doing everything I could to lock things down. And here's the kicker, after all this madness, Jess decided to get involved. She apologized for not telling me sooner and offered to help with dealing with the scammers and the bank. But at that point, I was just done. I couldn't handle it. I felt like I had been an idiot in every sense. Every step I took felt like it led to a bigger mess, and I couldn't fix it. The worst part? I still haven't gotten my money back. The coffee maker is still sitting in my kitchen, mocking me. And honestly, I'm too embarrassed to even throw it away. I'm just hoping that, one day, I can laugh about this. But for now, I'm still reeling from my own stupidity. So, yeah. TIFU by buying a high-end coffee maker that ended up being part of a massive scam, compromising my credit card information, and dragging my girlfriend into the mess. I'm still trying to recover from it all, and every day feels like I'm unearthing new layers of bad decisions. At least I'll never buy anything online without doing research again. I hope. Hey, friends! If you enjoy this content, don't forget to like the video and share your thoughts in the comments. We really want to know what you like and what can be improved. What do you think of the video? Are there any topics you'd like to see in future videos? Your feedback really helps us get better. Thanks for being with us. TIFU by accidentally sending my ex a screenshot of my search history while trying to impress a new date. So, here's the thing. I, M/27, recently started dating again after a pretty messy breakup with my ex, F/26, about 8 months ago. It was rough, but I was finally feeling like myself again. I had met a really great woman, Sarah, F/25, through a mutual friend, and we hit it off immediately. I mean, we're talking deep conversations, lots of laughing, and a vibe that was just right. We had been chatting for a few weeks before going on our first date, and I was really excited to see where things might go. I should have known I was in for disaster the moment I decided to be too clever for my own good. It all started when Sarah and I had a late-night conversation about, well, you know, that thing people do when they're getting to know each other a little better. She asked me about past relationships, and we both agreed it was probably best not to dwell too much on our exes. It wasn't about them anymore, it was about where we were headed, right? But somehow, we got onto the topic of things that go down in relationships, things that don't go down, if you catch my drift, and the conversation turned slightly playful. We started joking around about how our past partners didn't exactly live up to our expectations. And, of course, because I was feeling comfortable, I thought I'd take the opportunity to send her a screenshot of my phone's search history. Yeah, stupid, I know. At that moment, it felt like a great idea. I mean, it was me showing Sarah that I was caring enough to be open, honest, and nonchalant about how awkward past relationships had been. Besides, I was trying to make it clear I wasn't some kind of player or anything like that. I just wanted to show her that I had learned from my mistakes. Here's the thing, I'm not exactly the most tech-savvy person in the world. Sure, I know how to navigate my phone, but I'm not the best when it comes to screenshots and all that. So, I decided to take a screenshot of my search history, because, why not? Right? Here's where the screw-up happens. As I opened my phone to grab the screenshot, I realized something. My ex had been texting me that day, we've kept things friendly, and I hadn't blocked her or anything. I had forgotten to reply to a few messages she sent earlier, and one of them was just a simple "Hey, can we talk about some things soon?" So, before I took the screenshot, I accidentally swiped into that conversation. I didn't think it was a big deal at first. I'd just swipe back up and grab my search history. But as you can guess by now, I did not realize what had happened. When I took the screenshot, I wasn't paying attention to the preview screen. I thought I had only captured the search bar with my search history, but in reality, I had captured a full screenshot that included my ex's text thread right there at the bottom. And the worst part? She had sent me a picture of a very, very personal nature, one that I was hoping to never see again. And there it was, completely visible in the screenshot I was about to send to Sarah. I didn't even realize what had happened until about 15 seconds later when I was already sending the screenshot over to Sarah. I looked down at my phone, and my stomach dropped. I had just sent an image with a full-on view of my ex's intimate photo. I panicked. I immediately hit the unsend button, but as we all know, there's a very small window of time to unsend messages. And of course, Sarah had already seen it. Not only had she seen it, but she was immediately texting me back. Why did you send me this?" Sarah's message came through in all caps, along with a string of question marks that seemed to stretch on forever. I quickly typed back, "Wait, no, I didn't mean to send that. That's not what I wanted to show you. I was trying to send you my search history. I swear, I was trying to make a joke about my past relationships." But of course, Sarah didn't care about my explanation. She was too busy processing the fact that I had accidentally sent her an intimate photo from my ex. "That's not okay," Sarah responded after a long pause. "We need to talk." I tried to salvage things by calling her, but she didn't pick up. I sent her more texts, profusely apologizing and explaining that it was a mistake, that I wasn't trying to make her uncomfortable or disrespect her in any way. I promised that I would never do something like that again, and that I would make sure my phone was locked down properly in the future. The next few hours were a blur of stress, embarrassment, and complete humiliation. Sarah eventually called me back, and we talked about what had happened. She seemed to understand that it wasn't intentional, but she said she needed time to process everything. She explained that she wasn't sure if she could continue seeing someone who had that kind of situation in their past. At that moment, I realized I had probably ruined my chance with her. I felt like an idiot for being so careless. Not only had I ruined a great date with a fantastic woman, but I also had made myself look like a complete jerk by sending her that message. Sarah said that she needed space, and I completely respected that. We didn't talk much after that. In the end, we ended things amicably, but I've learned a huge lesson about not only being careful with technology, but also being cautious with how much of my past I bring into new relationships. You'd think that sending a simple screenshot would be harmless, but it turns out one small mistake can destroy everything in the blink of an eye. So, to anyone reading this, please, for the love of all things good, double-check what you're sending and be mindful of the past you carry with you. Don't be a dumbass like me. It could cost you more than just a little embarrassment. And now, every time I look at my phone, I cringe. TLDR, accidentally sent my ex's intimate photo to a woman I was dating while trying to show off my search history. It ruined everything. TIFU by trying to impress my crush with a foolproof cooking recipe and almost burning down my apartment. So, let me start by saying I am not exactly a culinary genius. I can handle basic stuff like cereal, pasta, and scrambled eggs, but anything beyond that is a mystery to me. The other day, though, I got this brilliant idea: why not try to impress the girl I've been crushing on for the past few months by cooking her a fancy meal? I mean, how hard could it be? I've seen enough cooking shows to know that if you follow the recipe, you can't mess it up, right? It all started when I saw a recipe for chicken Alfredo on Pinterest. It looked simple enough: some chicken, pasta, and homemade Alfredo sauce. The kind of thing you'd expect in a 5-star restaurant. The moment I saw it, I was hooked. This was the meal that would make her fall head over heels for me. I immediately texted her to ask if she was free that weekend, and she agreed to come over to my place. I told her I'd cook dinner, and she seemed genuinely excited. My mind started racing, imagining her sitting at my table, looking impressed as I served this flawless, home-cooked meal. I should have known from the start that I was in over my head, but my confidence got the better of me. I made a grocery list, went to the store, and spent a good amount of time picking out all the ingredients. The chicken breasts, the heavy cream, the Parmesan cheese, and, of course, the pasta. I even bought a bottle of white wine to set the mood. All the pieces were coming together. Fast forward to the day of the dinner. I was feeling confident, ready to show off my skills. I set up my kitchen like a professional chef, knives neatly arranged, utensils in place, and the recipe printed out in front of me. I had even watched a YouTube tutorial on how to properly pan-sear chicken. I was practically a pro by this point, right? As the time approached for her to arrive, I started the prep. First, I seasoned the chicken. The recipe said to season it with salt, pepper, and garlic powder. Seemed simple enough. Then, I heated up the pan to sear the chicken. It was all going well at first. The chicken was sizzling, the smell was amazing. I was already picturing the moment she would sit down to eat and tell me how this was the best meal she'd ever had. But, as I got into the rhythm of cooking, I realized I hadn't actually read through the recipe carefully enough. It turns out I was supposed to cook the chicken on medium heat, but I was too focused on getting the perfect sear and cranked the heat up to high. I heard the chicken crackle and pop as the oil in the pan started to splatter all over the place. No big deal, I thought. I grabbed a spatula, flipped the chicken, and tried to keep my composure. Here's where things took a turn. While I was dealing with the chicken, I forgot to turn down the heat on the pan. The oil in the pan started smoking, and I could hear a faint hissing sound. At this point, I should have realized that something was wrong, but instead, I panicked. I grabbed the heavy cream for the Alfredo sauce and poured it in, thinking it would calm everything down. Instead, the oil and cream collided in a fiery explosion of splattering hot liquid. In an instant, my once pristine kitchen turned into a chaotic mess of splattered oil and sauce everywhere. The pan was now a dangerous inferno. I could feel the heat from the flames licking at my face, and the smoke quickly began filling the room. I frantically grabbed the pan handle to move it off the burner, but in my panic, I knocked over the wine bottle I had so carefully placed on the counter. It rolled off, hit the ground, and shattered everywhere. Now there was broken glass, wine, and smoke everywhere. I looked at the clock. She was due to arrive in 15 minutes. My heart raced. The fire alarm began blaring, and the kitchen was turning into a disaster zone. I ran to the sink, grabbed a dish towel, and frantically waved it around, trying to get rid of the smoke, but it just made everything worse. Now I was coughing, wheezing, and, to make matters even worse, the chicken was a charred black mess. I had officially ruined the dinner. Panic set in. I couldn't serve her burnt chicken with a side of disaster. There was no time to clean up everything, and I couldn't afford to let her know I had somehow managed to burn down my kitchen. I turned off the stove and stepped back, trying to figure out what to do. It was clear now that my plan was hopelessly derailed. I had to think fast. I ran into the living room and grabbed my phone. I texted her to say, "Hey, quick question, how do you feel about ordering takeout instead? I've had a small cooking mishap, and I don't want to risk it." To my surprise, she replied almost immediately, "Sure. No worries, I'm just excited to see you." Relief flooded over me. She wasn't mad. She wasn't even disappointed. She was understanding. I quickly called the nearest Italian restaurant and placed an order for some pasta and chicken Alfredo, hoping it wouldn't take too long to get here. As I waited for the food to arrive, I grabbed a bottle of wine from my fridge, opened it, and poured us both glasses. I took a deep breath, thinking about how this could have gone so much better if I hadn't tried to do everything myself. At least she was coming over, and we could still have a great time. When she finally arrived, I greeted her at the door with a big smile and tried to play it cool, like everything was fine. She stepped inside, and I led her to the living room, where I had set up a makeshift dinner table with candles. The place was a mess, but I'd cleaned up the worst of it, hoping she wouldn't notice. I poured us both some wine and started chatting, trying to distract her from the cooking disaster. Not long after, the doorbell rang. The food had arrived. We dug into the takeout pasta, and she seemed to genuinely enjoy it. It wasn't the romantic home-cooked meal I'd planned, but it was still a fun night. We laughed about my cooking mishap, and she reassured me that it didn't matter at all. In the end, I may have failed in the kitchen, but I learned a valuable lesson. Sometimes, trying to impress someone isn't about grand gestures, it's about being yourself and being honest when things don't go according to plan. And, most importantly, I'll be sticking to pasta and sauce from now on, no more cooking disasters for me. So, to everyone out there, don't try to cook an elaborate meal if you don't know what you're doing. It's not worth it. Take it from me, your kitchen, and your crush, will thank you. TIFU by accidentally going viral on TikTok for a breakup that wasn't mine. So, this happened about a month ago and I'm still trying to climb out of the wreckage. For context, I'm a 27-year-old guy working in marketing at a mid-sized company, and until recently, I had zero interest in TikTok. But then my younger sister, who is a total TikTok junkie, convinced me to join so I could see what the youth are doing. I agreed mostly out of boredom. I had no intention of posting anything. But after watching a bunch of ridiculous videos, I got inspired to make one. I had this idea for a fake breakup skit, completely fictional, just something dramatic and over the top for laughs. The premise was this: a guy, played by me, is sitting in a coffee shop when his girlfriend walks in, visibly angry. She slams her keys on the table and says, "I know what you did, Mark." My real name is not Mark, by the way. The guy tries to deny it, but then she pulls out a phone and plays a video of him with another girl. The video ends with her pouring a drink on him and storming out. Classic viral bait, right? It was all acted. Poorly acted, mind you, but I added dramatic music, some fake crying, and TikTok's story time voice filter. I even roped in my coworker Jess to play the girlfriend. It took us 2 hours to shoot, and I edited it that night just for fun. I posted it with the caption, "She found out the truth, #breakup, #caught cheating, #drama." Went to sleep. No big deal. I wake up to 300K views. By lunchtime, it had crossed 1 million. By the end of the day, 5 million. People were furious. Comment sections were filled with "Mark deserves nothing," "Jess, Queen, good for you," and "I can't believe he recorded this, the audacity." Someone even made a duet where they analyzed our body language. Another person made fan art of Jess dumping the drink on me like she was some avenging angel. Here's where it starts getting bad. First, people thought it was real. Like, completely real. I thought the obviously fake acting would clue them in, but no, everyone assumed it was genuine. Second, people started recognizing me. I went to the grocery store 2 days later and a teenage girl whispered to her friend, "That's the cheating guy from TikTok." I was both horrified and fascinated. Then, the real nightmare began when my actual girlfriend, Olivia, saw the video. I hadn't told her about it because I didn't think it was a big deal. I figured she'd laugh and roll her eyes. But when you find out your boyfriend is going viral for cheating, fictional or not, and didn't tell you about it, you start to ask questions. She called me at 10 p.m., voice shaking, and said, "Is there something you need to tell me?" I tried to explain. I told her it was fake, that Jess is just a coworker, that I thought it was funny. But Olivia was already spiraling. She wasn't mad about the acting. She was mad that I hadn't mentioned it at all. That I'd made something so public, so dramatic, and hadn't even thought to say, "Hey, by the way, I'm fake cheating on TikTok with another woman." Which, fair. But I was dumb and thought it was harmless. She said she needed space. And I, in peak idiot fashion, thought it would blow over. It didn't. Meanwhile, the video kept climbing. 10 million views. Then 15. BuzzFeed wrote an article about the most brutal coffee shop breakup caught on camera. They called it raw and unfiltered. I laughed for 5 seconds before realizing the story was now completely out of my control. Then came the DMs, hundreds of them. Some were from people telling me I was scum. Others were from people asking Jess out. One guy said, "Bro, if I ever see you in real life, it's on site." Someone else sent me a long message about how I reminded them of their ex and they hoped I stepped on a Lego every day until I died. I tried to post a follow-up video explaining it was fake. I even showed behind-the-scenes footage. But the damage was done. People either didn't see it or didn't believe it. Some said I was just backpedaling because I got caught. Others accused me of gaslighting the community. The worst part? My boss found out. Apparently his teenage daughter saw the video and said, "Isn't that guy in your Zoom meetings?" So now my boss thinks I'm having a public affair. I had to sit through a very awkward HR meeting where I explained that I was not, in fact, emotionally manipulating the internet or cheating on anyone. They let me off with a warning, but now I'm known as TikTok guy around the office. As for Olivia? We talked. She eventually believed me but said the whole thing made her feel like I had no awareness of how things I do can affect her. Which is true. I'd acted like a clown without considering the real-world consequences. She didn't break up with me, but we're reevaluating things. So basically, I almost got dumped for a breakup that never actually happened. The video is now at 22 million views. People still do edit. A clothing brand asked if they could use the footage in a campaign about female empowerment. Jess is now thinking of becoming a full-time influencer. Meanwhile, I've deleted the app, locked my Instagram, and flinch every time someone at Starbucks looks at me for longer than 2 seconds. So yeah. I made one fake breakup video and accidentally destroyed my relationship, my reputation, and my sense of peace. FML. TIFU by pretending to be an art expert on a date and accidentally insulting a world-famous artist. So I, 34M, went on a date last weekend with someone I've been chatting with on a dating app for a couple weeks. Let's call her Rachel, 29F. She's smart, funny, outdoorsy, and crucial for this story, a painter. Like, an actual artist. I didn't know how serious she was about it, but she mentioned working in a studio, selling pieces, and teaching art classes, which sounded impressive. I'm more of a spreadsheets and email guy, but I really liked her and wanted to impress her. When we were planning our date, she mentioned there was an art exhibit in town featuring a modern expressionist she really admired and asked if I'd want to check it out with her. I googled the exhibit, saw a lot of red and blue splashes and angular faces, and thought, sure, I can handle this. Maybe even look cultured while I'm at it. Here's where I made my first mistake. I decided to pretend I knew more about art than I did. I didn't want to come across as clueless, so I spent the night before watching YouTube videos with titles like How to Sound Smart About Art and reading summaries of different movements. I even practiced squinting at paintings and murmuring things like fascinating use of negative space in front of my bathroom mirror. I thought I was ready. We met at the museum on Saturday. She looked amazing and gave me a big hug right away, which boosted my confidence. I figured, how hard can this be? The first room was full of chaotic, colorful canvases, bold, strange, raw energy stuff. I thought it looked like something a particularly angry 5-year-old might do during a sugar crash, but I kept that to myself. Rachel was glowing. She was clearly moved, staring at each piece like she was in church. We walked up to a large painting, red swirls bleeding into deep blues, streaks of black cutting through it all like scars. The title read, Grief Reconstructed, 1982. I took a breath, tilted my head like I saw in a video, and said, huh. Interesting balance of chaos and control. It's almost juvenile, but in a purposeful way. Like the artist is intentionally channeling raw, undeveloped emotion to create a sort of primal honesty. Am I crazy, or does this look like something a toddler would do with more trauma? I chuckled at my own fake analysis, expecting Rachel to laugh. She didn't. In fact, she looked kind of stunned. Not mad, but frozen. I immediately felt like I'd said something wrong. She turned to me very slowly and said, wow. That's bold. Too harsh? I asked, trying to backpedal. She looked back at the painting. No, it's just, this is one of my mom's pieces. I swear my stomach dropped like a malfunctioning elevator. I stood there in dead silence, blinking. Surely I misheard. Wait, your mom painted this? Rachel nodded slowly. Yeah. She was part of the New York collective in the early 80s. She passed away a few years ago. This is one of her most well-known pieces. They just acquired it for the museum's permanent collection. I just stood there, feeling my soul leave my body through my shoes. I had, essentially, walked into a museum, pointed at this woman's mother's legacy, and called it traumatized toddler art. I tried to laugh it off with a joke, well, I mean, toddlers have a kind of genius, right? But it sounded like I was having a stroke. Rachel smiled tightly and said she wanted to look at the rest of the exhibit. We wandered through a few more rooms in awkward silence, me too scared to comment on anything, her clearly retreating into her own thoughts. She didn't make a scene, bless her, but the energy was completely different. Eventually, she said she had a meeting with her gallery later and needed to head out early. I offered to walk her to her car, but she politely declined. "Thanks for coming," she said, and gave me a quick hug that felt more like a goodbye forever. I went home and spent the rest of the night Googling her mom's name. Turns out she's famous. Like, studied in art schools, TED Talk about color theory famous. Her paintings are in 3 major museums. I had somehow missed all this in my predate research. I even found an interview where Rachel talks about growing up watching her mom paint, how she would fall asleep in the studio listening to jazz while her mom layered color onto canvas. It was beautiful. And I'd compared it to trauma scribbles. I texted Rachel later that night to apologize. I explained that I didn't know it was her mom's work, that I was trying to sound smarter than I was, and that I really did think the piece was powerful. I just have a dumb way of expressing myself sometimes. She replied the next morning, "Thanks for the apology. I get that you were trying. Maybe just lead with honesty next time." We haven't spoken since. So now I'm the guy who tried to impress a girl by fake analyzing modern art and ended up insulting her deceased mother's internationally acclaimed painting. I don't think I'll ever step foot in that museum again. I also don't think I'll be pretending to be cultured on future dates. At this point, I'd rather own up to knowing nothing and risk sounding dumb than go through that again. The worst part? I kind of do see the genius in the painting now. But it's too late. I already opened my big mouth and said it looked like it belonged on a fridge. TIFU by accidentally starting a fire in my apartment trying to impress a girl with homemade creme brulee. So this happened a few months ago, but I still get anxiety when I walk past the kitchen section at IKEA. I, 29M, had been talking to this girl, Lucy, 27F, for about a month. We met at a friend's game night and hit it off over our shared love of cooking shows. We weren't professional chefs or anything, just avid consumers of Great British Bake Off and the occasional YouTube rabbit hole of how to make perfect soufflés, macarons, etc. One night, I invited her over for dinner. Nothing crazy, just some homemade pasta. I make a pretty mean carbonara, and dessert. I decided to try my hand at making creme brulee because 1, it sounded fancy, 2, I had watched like 5 videos on how to make it, and 3, it required a blowtorch, and I thought, what could be more impressive than wielding fire in a controlled, dessert-based environment? I got everything ready before she arrived. The custards were chilling in the fridge, my apartment was clean, candles were lit, but not the cheap, overly romantic kind, classy scented ones from Target that say things like moss and sage, and music was playing at that perfect background volume where you don't have to yell but it still fills awkward silences. Dinner went great. We laughed, we talked, we bonded over how we both think cilantro tastes like soap. I know, genetic thing, whatever. Then I brought out the creme brulee. Now, here's where I start messing up. I don't own a proper culinary torch. But I do own a small butane torch I bought from a hardware store. It's meant for light soldering jobs and, according to YouTube, can be used for cooking if you're careful. Guess which part one wasn't? I brought the ramekins out to the coffee table. Not ideal, but I wanted her to sit and enjoy the show while I caramelized the sugar. I was already hyping it up. Watch this, it's like dessert and pyrotechnics combined. I clicked on the torch and gave it a few test bursts. It flamed up with this aggressive blue jet that sounded like a tiny rocket engine. Lucy laughed nervously and moved back a bit. I reassured her, it's totally safe. I watched, like, 3 tutorials. I leaned in and started torching the top of the custard. The sugar started to melt, and for a second, it was beautiful. Golden, bubbling perfection. I moved to the second ramekin. Here's where I made my critical error. I set the torch down, still lit, for just a second while I reached for a napkin to wipe my hand. The torch tipped. It rolled off the edge of the table and landed nozzle first onto my decorative area rug. You know, the kind that's more synthetic than fabric? Yeah, it basically lit up like someone had poured gasoline on a pile of dry hay. A whoosh sound later and suddenly my living room was on fire. Lucy screamed. I screamed. The torch was still blasting flames into the rug while I scrambled to pick it up without burning my hand off. I finally grabbed it with a towel and threw it into the kitchen sink. Meanwhile, the fire had started creeping up the sheer curtain nearby like it had beef with my whole apartment. I sprinted to the kitchen, grabbed the fire extinguisher under the sink, thank you, landlord regulations, and absolutely unloaded it into the living room. White powder everywhere. On the rug, on the couch, on the half-eaten creme brulees, on Lucy, who was now coughing and looking at me like she had made a very bad life choice. The fire was out, but the damage was done. We stood there in silence, covered in chemical foam, eyes watering from smoke and embarrassment. Then, completely out of nowhere, Lucy started laughing. Like, really laughing. Ugly, doubled over, can't breathe kind of laughing. Between gasps she said, "You tried to seduce me with fire custard and almost killed us. This is the best first date I've ever had." Somehow, despite the fact that my living room looked like a meth lab exploded during a baking contest, she stayed. We spent the next hour cleaning up what we could, drinking wine on my balcony, the only non-toxic area left, and just talking. I found out later she told her friends about it and they referred to me for weeks as the creme brulee arsonist. The aftermath? I had to replace the rug, repaint part of the wall, and I still get a little PTSD every time I hear a butane canister hiss. But Lucy and I have been dating ever since. And yes, I eventually bought a proper kitchen torch. It lives in a locked cabinet now. TIFU by giving my date a genuine medieval disease. This happened last month, and I still haven't emotionally recovered. For context, I, 31 recently got out of a long-term relationship. After licking my wounds for a while, I decided to finally re-enter the dating scene. I downloaded a few apps, updated my profile pictures, and even borrowed my sister's dog for some wholesome content. Yes, I know, cliché, but you play the game or you die alone. Anyway, after about 2 weeks of awkward small talk and ghostings, I matched with Claire, 28F. Claire was gorgeous, smart, into nerdy stuff like D&D and old literature, and, crucially, she actually responded to messages with more than 2 words. We hit it off quickly. After a few days of chatting, we decided to meet up for drinks and dinner. Now here's where I have to mention something important. I'm a bit of a history nerd. Like, I own replica swords, go to Renaissance fairs in full armor, and read 16th century medical texts for fun. Weird hobby, I know, but it's my thing. One of my prized possessions is a small wooden chest of medieval apothecary items I bought from an estate sale. The guy who sold it to me claimed it was genuinely old stuff, but I figured it was just replicas. Still, it looked amazing on my bookshelf, right next to my Chaucer anthology. Fast forward to the date. Things are going great. Claire and I have great chemistry, we're laughing, we're sharing stories, and we eventually end up back at my place. She's checking out my books and trinkets, and when she sees the wooden chest, she practically squeals. "Oh my God, this is beautiful. What's in it?" And, like a moron, I open it. Inside are old glass vials, dried herbs, strange powders, and a wrapped linen pouch that I hadn't actually opened before. Claire picks up one of the vials and sniffs it before I can stop her. She coughs and says, "That's earthy." At this point, I'm trying to be cool about it because I don't want to be the guy who's like, "No, don't touch my spooky dust." But I'm also realizing I maybe should have, actually checked what was inside this chest before showing it off like a museum exhibit. The night continues. We make out a bit, and she ends up staying the night. Next morning, she seems fine, if a little sniffly, but we chalk it up to allergies. We say our goodbyes, and I'm feeling pretty smug about how well things went. 2 days later, Claire texts me saying she's got a terrible fever, chills, and swollen lymph nodes. She thinks it might be the flu, but it feels weird. She's going to urgent care. I tell her to keep me updated and try not to panic. Later that night, she texts again. I don't want to freak you out, but they're transferring me to the hospital. Cue full panic. I call her, and she says the doctors are running tests but they're concerned it might be something bacterial. Her neck is swollen, and she's got weird black patches appearing on her arm. My blood goes cold. I start Googling symptoms. Fever. Swollen nodes. Black patches. I find myself on a CDC page for bubonic plague. This is when I remember that pouch in the chest. The one I never opened. Like an idiot possessed, I go over to the bookshelf, take out the chest, and unwrap the linen pouch. Inside are small, desiccated black lumps. At first I think they're dried berries. Then I realize they have fur on them. These are rat remains. And they smell absolutely foul. I have now reached full DEFCON 1. I double-bag the chest and drive it out to a local university where a friend of mine works in the anthropology department. I beg him to take a look. 2 days later, he calls me. Very calm. Too calm. You need to talk to the CDC. Turns out, the items were indeed authentic. The chest likely dated back to the 14th or 15th century and had been poorly stored, allowing the preserved fleas or bacteria inside to remain dormant. It wasn't the plague itself in transmissible form, thank God, but my handling it, and Claire's sniffing that vial, might have stirred up centuries-old bacteria. Combined with her weakened immune system, she has a mild autoimmune condition I didn't know about. It triggered a nasty but non-contagious infection that mimicked some plague symptoms. The hospital ran PCR tests and, thankfully, ruled out Yersinia pestis, actual plague bacteria, but she did test positive for Pasteurella, a rare but potentially serious bacterial infection sometimes linked to decaying animal matter. So yes, my date got a 600-year-old rat disease from my cool antique. Claire made a full recovery, but let me tell you, explaining all this to her while she was high on hospital painkillers and antibiotics was not ideal. So you're saying I got sick because I smelled some wizard potion you never opened? I offered to pay her medical bills, which she graciously declined, and she even laughed about it once she was out of the woods. She did, however, make me promise to never open mysterious medieval objects without proper lab conditions. We didn't end up dating seriously after that. I can't blame her. Getting mildly plague-adjacent on a first date is a pretty hard act to follow. But she still texts me memes about rat kings and sends plague doctor emojis every once in a while. As for me, I had the chest professionally sealed and donated it to the university for study. I now keep my historical collecting to books and sanitized artifacts only. The real kicker? The dog in my dating profile was hers. Guess who got custody of the dog? Yup. Not me. TIFU by letting my neighbor think I'm in a cult because of my stupid hobby. So this happened over the past month, and I just now learned the full scope of the damage. Buckle up. I live in a pretty quiet suburban neighborhood. The kind with nosy neighbors, weekly lawn battles, and the occasional passive-aggressive HOA letter if your trash bins are out for too long. I moved here about 2 years ago after getting a decent remote job, and I mostly keep to myself. I like my privacy. My nearest neighbor is an older woman named Karen, not that kind of Karen, just an actual Karen in her 60s, very sweet but definitely the curious and suspicious type. She's the unofficial neighborhood watch and knows everyone's business. She also has binoculars, which is either quirky or terrifying depending on the day. Now, here's where it all starts. I have this weird hobby, historical reenactment. Not the Civil War kind, I'm into old religious rites. Weird, obscure stuff. I collect ancient religious texts, replica robes, ceremonial props. I don't believe in any of it, I'm just fascinated by the history and symbolism. It's like live-action roleplay meets a history class. I even do solo reenactments in my backyard or basement for fun, especially when I'm testing out a new costume or chant. About a month ago, I got this 16th century manuscript replica from Eastern Europe. It came with instructions on a spring equinox rite that was once performed in the Carpathian Mountains by a small monastic group. I was stoked. The rite involved a robe, a goat mask, candles arranged in a very specific pattern, and chanting in Old Church Slavonic, which I butchered through Google Translate and some old Reddit threads. So one Saturday night, around 11 p.m., I set up the whole thing in my backyard. I wore the goat mask and the robe, lit the candles, and started walking in a circle chanting these phonetic approximations of the ritual. It was honestly going great. The air was crisp, the moon was bright, and I felt like I was nailing the vibe. Enter Karen. Apparently, she'd been watching from her upstairs window with the aforementioned binoculars. All she sees is her reclusive neighbor in a robe and goat mask, surrounded by candles, chanting in a strange language and drawing symbols in the grass with a stick. To make matters worse, my Bluetooth speaker was playing some ambient monastery drone music in the background, which I now realize sounded like wailing. I finish my reenactment, proud and content, and go to bed thinking nothing of it. The next day, I notice Karen avoiding eye contact. She usually waves when I go to get the mail. Not this time. I wave. Nothing. Cold shoulder. I brush it off. Maybe she's just in a mood. Then things start to get weird. On Tuesday, I find a pamphlet on my doorstep for a local church with "We are here for you" written in thick Sharpie across the front. A few days later, another neighbor I've barely spoken to drops off cookies and mentions, in passing, how community can really help when you're lost. Then Karen stops me while I'm mowing the lawn and says, "If you ever need to talk, or get out of something. I've been through hard times too." She squeezes my arm, like she's about to cry. I'm baffled. That night, I remember the ritual. My brain connects the dots. I realize what she probably saw. I laugh about it. But now, I'm curious. I want to know how far this misunderstanding has spread. So I create a burner Facebook account and join the neighborhood group under the name Jake Peterson, a combo of my cousin's first name and my favorite high school teacher. I scroll through recent posts and there it is. Concerned about strange behavior on Elm Street, posted by, you guessed it, Karen. There's no picture, but she describes it perfectly: hooded figure in a goat mask, strange chanting, fire hazard levels of candles. Possibly dangerous. May need intervention. The comments are gold. Asterisk, you need to call the police. Asterisk, could be Wiccan, but sounds darker. Asterisk, do they sacrifice animals? Asterisk, my cousin was in a cult once. It started like this. I read through dozens of replies. Half the neighborhood thinks I'm summoning demons. One guy offers to bless the yard with holy water. Another person says they saw me burying something, it was compost. At this point, I should have just come clean. Explained the hobby. Maybe shown them my shelf of replica books and costumes. But here's the problem, I was enjoying this. Not the being feared part, but the absurdity of it. So instead, I leaned in. The next weekend, I accidentally left a very old-looking scroll visible through the window, along with a fake taxidermy raven perched on a stand. I played Gregorian chants loud enough for people to hear faintly at night. I installed a red light bulb on my porch. The Facebook group exploded. One neighbor posted a blurry photo of my silhouette through the curtain and wrote, "It's getting worse." I heard him chanting again. Someone else claimed they saw a second person in a robe. Nope, just me in a coat rack. The HOA sent me a warning letter about excessive use of ambient noise and lighting. But then it went too far. Last Thursday night, I was watching TV when I heard a knock. I open the door and there's a man holding a Bible and a thermos. He introduces himself as Pastor Mike from a nearby church. He says, "We've heard you might be going through something dark. We're here to help you find the light." Behind him, Two people are standing silently holding candles. I kid you not. It looked like a mini exorcism gang. I didn't have the heart to lie to Pastor Mike. I invited him in, showed him my props, explained the hobby, the reenactments, the fake chants. He didn't get it, but he was polite. Before he left, he patted my shoulder and said, "I'm glad you're not sacrificing goats. You seem like a good man. Just, maybe draw the blinds next time." Word spread fast. The Facebook post was deleted. Karen left a note apologizing for the misunderstanding but added, "You do have a flair for the dramatic." She's waving again, but now with this weird, knowing smile like she still thinks I'm hiding something. Moral of the story: never underestimate how creepy your nerdy hobby can look from a distance, especially when goat masks and chanting are involved. Also, always draw the blinds. TIFU by trying to prank my girlfriend and accidentally traumatizing her instead. So this happened about 3 weeks ago and I've only just now gotten to the point where we can both sort of laugh about it. Emphasis on sort of. For context, my girlfriend, Leah, and I have been together for about 2 years. We moved in together late last year. I'm 29, she's 27, and we're both huge fans of true crime documentaries, scary movies, urban legends, etc. One of our favorite things to do on Friday nights is open a bottle of wine and watch the worst B-horror films we can find. We've got a running competition for who can find the most ridiculous one. Anyway, a few months back, Leah got super into this YouTube channel that tells creepy real-life survival stories. Like, people who got stuck in the woods, lost at sea, kidnapped and escaped. Pretty intense stuff. One story that seriously messed with her was about a guy who found out someone had been secretly living in his attic for weeks. That one really stuck with her. She double-checked our crawl space after watching it. So naturally, like the dumbass I am, I decided that would be the perfect premise for a prank. She was going to be out of town for a weekend to visit her sister. I took the opportunity to execute my little plan. I bought this cheap motion-activated speaker off Amazon and recorded a few creepy noises, soft footsteps, a whisper saying hello, and a few random bumps and scratches. I placed the speaker behind a vent in our hallway that leads to the attic. It's not actually connected to anything but makes a perfect echo chamber. I also left a ladder out in the garage, positioned under the attic entrance like someone had climbed up recently. The piece de resistance? I smeared a few muddy footprints in the hallway. Not many. Just enough to make it seem like someone had come down from the attic and maybe gone back up. I timed the speaker to go off late at night, just once every couple hours, so it wouldn't be constant, just enough to freak someone out who's already on edge. Leah got home Sunday night. She was tired, so I didn't expect the prank to fully set in right away. I was going to let it build for a day or two and then reveal everything with a laugh. That did not happen. Monday morning, I left for work and waited eagerly for her to start texting me about weird noises or anything suspicious. But she didn't say a word. All day, nothing. I figured maybe she hadn't noticed yet. I got home and Leah seemed off. She was quiet, a little jittery. I asked how her day was, and she gave a weird, fake-sounding fine. I asked if she slept okay, and she nodded without looking me in the eye. Red flags? Sure. Did I ignore them? Also sure. That night, she went to bed earlier than usual. I stayed up watching TV, but around 1 a.m. I heard her scream from the bedroom. I bolted in and found her standing on the bed with her phone clutched in both hands, flashlight on, pointing at the hallway. "The vent," she whispered. I heard something whisper my name. This was the moment where a normal person would have said, "Okay, I'm sorry, this is a prank. It's fake." But in my infinite wisdom, I panicked and said, "I'll check it out," because I thought I could still spin it into something funny. I walked into the hallway, opened the closet under the attic crawlspace, and made a show of checking things. She was right behind me, clutching a baseball bat. I was just about to discover the speaker when the next sound triggered, this low, guttural breathing I'd put in as a joke. She screamed again, dropped the bat, and ran out the front door. Barefoot. In a t-shirt and pajama pants. I chased after her, trying to yell that it was a joke, but she was already halfway down the block. Long story short, it took me 20 minutes to convince her to come back inside. She didn't speak to me for the rest of the night. The next morning, she packed a bag and left for her sister's again. She stayed there for 4 days. When she came back, we had a long, very serious conversation. Turns out that attic guy's story had genuinely messed her up more than I realized. Like, actual nightmares and anxiety levels that made her avoid staying home alone. She just hadn't wanted to tell me how much it got to her because she thought it was silly. I felt like the biggest idiot on the planet. Still do. The worst part? During the 4 days she was gone, I kept hearing the damn speaker go off and freaking myself out. I couldn't figure out how to disable the timer because I'd used some janky app to set it up. I had to sleep with headphones in because I'd psyched myself out with my own prank. Now we've got a no prank rule in our relationship. We're also slowly talking about maybe moving to a new place later this year. Apparently once you think there's a ghost in your vent, it's hard to unthink it. Also, she's made me promise never to use the phrase "it was just a joke" again. Ever. And I can't blame her. Thank you for watching until the end. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel so you won't miss new videos. Also, leave a comment, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Your support and engagement mean a lot to me. See you in the next video.